First of all, thank you again for hosting me and allowing me to do this talk. Obviously, you can see my topic here is Don't Be a Fool, and it's a reflective conversation about doctoral fieldwork. I will also comment a little bit about what I am currently doing, what my project is, where I am currently, but I really want to focus more on my experience as a PhD student, as a doctoral student, some of the emotion there, some of the experiences I've had conducting fieldwork, and just give you a very raw and authentic kind of narrative of my experience thus far. I also want to open up this discussion to the rest of the participants here today, so that it is more of an opportunity for us to share our experiences, find ways that we can continue to support each other. And so I will have kind of an agenda here in the next couple slides, and then we'll progress through my presentation. Prior to getting started though, however, I do want to offer a trigger warning. And the reason is because this will be a little bit more raw, a little bit more kind of just unedited, unscripted conversation, and things listed here may arise. So I've listed a couple of items, a couple of topics that may come up. There is strong language. There are some topics that may be sensitive as they relate to mental health, as they relate to death. I will speak to some deaths in my families. And I also talk about some LGBTQ identity and safety issues. And so as we discuss in a group, other topics may arise. So I think it's important to keep in mind that we will be talking about some of these difficult topics. If at any moment you feel just overwhelmed, triggered, or just emotionally not able to stay in the room, feel free to leave, come back when you feel ready. Again, it's important that everyone's taking care of themselves. This is just our little roadmap for today and what we will discuss during this presentation. Of course, I want to start off by giving you some context, my positionality, talking about the setting in which I'm working, where I'm currently, and where I am in the stages of my work. I will also give you a timeline as to what has happened thus far that has led to where I am now, doing this actual field work, as well as, and that I have labeled kind of pre-COVID. And then of course, during COVID, we're still in the middle of this global pandemic. And so we will talk about what that's been like. I will address some challenges that I've seen that I've had to handle and kind of navigate through this experience. And then we'll have an opportunity to turn it over to you participants to talk about your personal experiences. And then I'll end with just a wrap up of some key takeaways that I've brought up during this presentation. Now, with that said, I do want to give everyone a spoiler alert. I will be dropping out of my program. Just kidding. April Fools. Happy Friday. I had to throw that in there. No, but real talk, I have to level with you. I was very close. At one point, I came just inches from dropping out and really pulling the plug on it all. And I'll elaborate a little bit more on that later. So why do this presentation? Why do I share my experience doing doctoral fieldwork? And honestly, it's been an emotional burden. It's a heavy topic that, quite frankly, I've encountered a lot of things that I didn't experience. I'm sure, we can prepare and learn how to do field work. We learn the fundamentals of conducting field work, but there's still so many things that caught me completely off guard that were completely unexpected. And so I do want to be very open and very genuine with this experience for people who maybe have not done field work. How can you prepare yourselves knowing what is possible moving forward? How can I make changes now to set myself up for success for things that you may face? So that's why we're having this presentation. And I do want to add that I don't have kind of answers for everything. There may be questions that I am unable to answer, but I do want to make sure that I'm sharing my experience, that you're able to share your experience, because together, through that collaboration and through that sharing, it can lead us to developing resources and different opportunities so that we can continue to support each other along this journey. Now, talking about positionality, it's not just kind of, oh, this is my identity, this is how I identify. It's not a litany, list of identities that that are both privileged and marginalized. No, this is a list of things that people will see when they first meet me, that through discussions and conversations, people will learn about me. That's what this list is. I am a white, hearing, cisgender, gay man. I'm neurodivergent, and by that I mean ADHD. I, of course, am in an academic program conducting research. I am from the United States. I do identify as someone who has Italian descent, and I have been able to connect with that here in Italy. I am a English L1 user. So as you can see here, there are identities, there are labels that are privileged as well as marginalized. And being able to navigate society, I have experienced certain hardships, moments of oppression where, it has led me to where I am now, all of those combined experiences. I know this is a lot of information on screen compared to the previous slide, but I want to talk a little bit about just the setting and where I am now. And I do want to mention that I have received permission and consent to share this information, to share the actual name of my site where I'm doing. Of course, this has already been approved. I have Irb approval for project 19221. So I do have approval to use the name of my site publicly with everyone today. So the bilingual project was established in 1994. In this particular place, they have 2 deaf students. And this year, I'm working with 2 deaf students, 3 interpreters. And altogether, this school has 5 interpreters, 3 of whom work in the elementary. And there's 1 that works in the middle school setting, and the others work in the high school setting. However, my work focuses solely on the elementary setting, the primaria. So we have 2 deaf students that are in 1 particular grade, and then another one that is in 2nd grade. So altogether, they have 1 interpreter working with 1 student and another interpreter working with another student. There are 3 interpreters that take turns with that 1 particular student. However, in terms of teachers and educators, there's a total of 9 educators. There's 10, 9 hearing and 1 deaf educator. Of course, they do all the different topics that they cover: math, Italian language. You can imagine just all of the different content areas that they review. The deaf teacher that's here actually works on teaching all of the students, whether they're deaf or hearing, teaching them Italian Sign Language, LIS, L-I-S, and making sure that they're developing proper skills, learning how to communicate themselves with each other, whether their students are deaf or hearing. They work alongside the hearing instructors to develop those skills in the students. The site is in northwestern Italy. It's in the Piemonte region. This is the sign for Piemonte. And it is kind of a country region. It's in the area of Biella. It's the light green region that you see there on the map on the right-hand side of the slide. So that's where I am currently since October. Now, if we can go back to the pre-COVID era, I arrived in New Mexico, started my PhD process at UNM, was doing my coursework, and I had an idea that I, already had this inkling, this sensation that I wanted to do some actual field work. Of course, there's a lot of policy and planning, and of course, the process as a student evolves. It's not static by any means. So I knew that I wanted to do qualitative work and having a more qualitative methodology in terms of being able to engage with people, being able to do that type of work, more focused on one situation or a couple of situations. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, that I wanted to be able to have this comparative study and really be able to develop a thorough analysis of this one particular site. So I took an introductory to methodological and qualitative research with Dr. Lois Myers. I did an ethnography class as well, where I learned more about just the fundamentals of conducting an ethnography and ethnographic studies. I also worked with Dr. Trefinia Piolidi. And they were able to support me in the advanced qualitative methods class, making sure that I had that support. And I consider Dr. Piolidi my methodologist, being able to help me with this process, learning how to conduct research. How should I approach this type of work? What methods specifically need to be included in my work, or even just provide the framework for the work that I wanted to carry out. And of course, having this hands-on experience was limited, was very limited. And by that, I mean, when I had a project, for example, when I was doing my practice project, I would be assigned to carry this out in these public schools in the Albuquerque area. However, other students were actually able to apply their work and their practice projects in the sites in which they were planning to conduct their research. I knew I wanted to do my work in Italy, and I wasn't able to travel to Italy to do my practice project. And it's fine that I was able to carry out and do some practice in these Albuquerque settings. However, it was very different because I wasn't able to get that experience, that firsthand experience where it was a very authentic experience compared to other international students. Maybe these other students who come from South America and are, learning how to carry out their projects. How are they able to practice? I mean, I know that that's a very real experience for several students where they're not able to get that hands-on practice for the work that they plan to do. And of course, practice is key, as we know. And so there was a lot of benefit in doing the practice project. However, I think in terms of getting a taste of what it means to be an ethnographer and do an ethnography project, it served its purpose. My interests were in the educational environment, specifically here in Italy. That's why I wanted to do, and that's how I applied to my Fulbright scholarship, or the grant, excuse me. So it was with the intention of assessing and looking at an interpreted environment in an educational setting. Of course, through all of the paperwork, I was at the same time doing my comps and still working on my comps. I still haven't finished my comps. So while doing all of this work, and maybe that could be another workshop where I could talk about writer's block and all of the experiences I had during the comps process, the comprehensive exams process. But having to be responsible for doing all of the application process, getting things done, getting things turned in, and at the same time, knowing that I have to meet certain deadlines with other things that I'm trying to balance on my plate, was this huge pressure, but a pressure that was essentially pushing me to finish. And unfortunately, in January of 2020, my grandmother passed. And that was right before the pandemic, right before COVID. I ended up moving to California for 3 months to spend time with my family. I really wanted a chance to be there for my family, to have their support as well as be supportive to them. So for 3 months, I was in that area. And of course, that's when COVID kind of reach that initial peak where things were closing down. Traveling was kind of at a standstill, weren't allowed to travel. And I was with my family, which was great. But I was there for 3 months, which meant that I couldn't make any progress. I have to say that I underestimated grief and the power of grief and what it meant to handle that and to experience that. And it really affected my process overall. It was towards the end of April, maybe before I came back to New Mexico, that Fulbright announced that I was awarded the grant. And then unfortunately, due to COVID, it was deferred. takes us to this slide, as you can see. So to give you this in a nutshell, COVID has affected every and any aspect of my life. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Of course, everyone has kind of seen the effects of how it has affected their work, their personal lives. So my grant was deferred, which changed my timeline. If my timeline was also extended. And once things were starting to catch momentum and I was able to get things kind of rolling again, I added additional stressors. There was more paperwork due to COVID. I was required to have a green pass. And that's something that is kind of a requirement in Europe. If you want to access any areas within the Europe, just anywhere in Europe, you do have to make sure you have proof of vaccination, proof of recent testing, etc. Especially with the spike of the new variant, they were requiring KN95 masks pretty much in any public space. If you wanted to go to the schools, adults had to have KN95 masks, and we weren't allowed to be without masks. However, now currently, some of those conditions have been altered. They've changed as of this Friday, April 1st. They are actually ending their state of emergency. Now that we're trying to kind of flatten the curve, people are allowed to wear just medical grade regular masks. They're not required to wear the KN95 masks. So, of course, had to make sure that I had my green pass, make sure that I carry it with me anywhere I go. And while I was here, I was living with a family here in Italy, in Biella. And they had another guest come as well, who was from another country, and they would stay long term alongside my stay. And so I would come working during the day, and I would come ready for interviews, ready to work with the staff members, and I would set up my cameras, all of my gear, make sure that I was ready. And one day, the day that I got there ready and I was just done, ready to get to work, I had a notification on my phone that says, this is just a notification to let you know that you had a close contact with someone who recently tested positive for COVID. And so in that moment, I couldn't stay. I wasn't allowed. I had to tear everything down, put everything away, and of course, communicate with the staff, let them know of what had happened. And again, another setback. And the teachers that I told in that moment, it seemed they weren't too worried at the time. They were like, "Oh, okay, well, it happens. We'll work with it. If you have to go home, that's fine. Stay a couple of days and then come back if you're good and if nothing happens." And I was kind of surprised that was their reaction. But of course, I want to make sure that I'm respectful of their rules, of their kind of statutes and anything like that. But anyway, I did kind of remove myself from that environment. I tested several times, all came back negative, so I never got sick. And we all know that those tests are very uncomfortable, so I did several of those uncomfortable nasal swabs, and they all came back negative. So now how COVID specifically impacted my research and my project, that's one whole kind of part of the journey. And I'll give you a chance to read this next slide on your own. So now I do want to talk a little bit about other delays that have come up and really deferred and kind of extended my project and my work. I arrived here in October of 2021. And immediately I had to navigate the bureaucracy of the country and getting approvals. But know that I hadn't started, when I started my project, I didn't have IRB approval just yet. And that's because I hadn't received formal support from the school that showed that I was approved to come. I mean, we had correspondence in email, in text, and I had received their word and their approval, but that wasn't enough for IRB. They wanted to receive a formal letter with letterhead and all, stating that the staff and the school were in agreement. However, the school had just hired a new principal, and of course, through the pandemic, these conversations were delayed, things were put in the back burner, and it took some time. I thought, it'd be greater if I was there in Italy. I could probably handle and get what I need a lot easier as opposed to communicating overseas and having to send emails back and forth. But quite frankly, even while I was there in person, getting in touch with people, sending communication, kind of being patient with just the delays, trying to get what I need in order to get started wasn't any better. It wasn't until maybe the first week, I want to say maybe November 7th, that first week, they finally gave me that letter. And so upon receiving that, of course, great. I was stoked. However, it needed to be translated. So I had to then translate this letter. I have a colleague here in Rome who was helping me with the translation. But then I needed to send it off to IRB. However, my friend was busy and they weren't always available. As soon as I got that done, I was able to send it off. I want to say maybe November 23rd, it was the third week of November that I sent off that translation back to IRB. And then I waited. Thanksgiving arrived, and that's when I was notified that a dear friend of mine in Albuquerque had passed. And I thought, okay, I just submitted my letter, I'm good to go. And I received this news, and it shook me. I was just devastated, lost for a solid 2 weeks, a very unproductive 2 weeks. And it just felt like it was one thing after the other, just this cascade of unfortunate events, setbacks. I finally got IRB approval, I think just maybe the day before, it was at Christmas Eve, I believe. And they said, all right, you're approved. You can go ahead and start. So the 4th, I'm ready. Excuse me, the 23rd, I'm ready. The next day, the school closes for Christmas break for the holidays. So I return January 10th. I get in touch with all of the teachers. We're starting to get all of the consent forms filled out, signed by all of the participants. I'm reaching out to parents, making sure I have parent consent. And I want to say that my biggest mistake in the research process was that I only had one informed consent, just one. One informed consent form. I should have, looking back, hindsight is 2020, I should have had at least two. The person that I was in contact with, of course, all of the people that were in direct contact with throughout the project, I had their approval, but I didn't gather individual informed consent forms from parents, from other guardians when asking about recordings, making sure that any of the video, while I would retract all names and faces and identifying features, I didn't have this informed consent from them. And so I did need to have this document. It was required. And of course, because I had included all in one, I thought it was going to be this all-inclusive form. Once I handed that over to parents, I had 5 parents say no, and they did not give me consent. And so again, I said, I tried to kind of backtrack and explain, you know what, I'm not using their faces, their names, I'm not using any information. I tried to explain my approach, And I asked Dr. Schaefer, Barb, I asked her for support. I said, what should I do? Should I make a separate form? I contacted IRB, and they said, well, you know what, we'll defer to the school. If the school says that you don't need parent consent, then we're okay. We're okay with that. We'll accept that. We'll defer to the school as long as you have the direct consent of the participants in which from whom you're collecting the data, then you'll be okay if that's okay with the school. So of course I followed that. I asked the school, make sure that it was okay with them. I didn't get an immediate response. And that's when I went ahead and met with Barb. And at this point, I was completely overwhelmed. And that's when I said this quote. At that point, I was just, as you can see, part of me just wanted to say, you know what, fuck it, and quit. And the advice I got from Barb was, you know what, I get where you're coming from. I get it. She had said, you know what, when you're working, it's important that you have milestones. If you want to say, all right, I'll get to this point, I'm going to give myself an out, get to this point, and if I get to this point, I'm out. But having points, having these milestones, if you're feeling stressed, if you're ready to call it quits, just fight that. Don't succumb to that. Give yourself an out, but work towards it. And I said, okay, I'm going to take some time. I really just focused on getting back in tune with everything. And suddenly the school contacts me and said, yeah, we're good. If you have consent from your participants, we're okay with that. To which I was thrilled, stoked. And so I was able to get started that first week of February doing actual face-to-face interviews, data collection, etc.
Now, I've already told you many different things throughout this presentation, and I want to preface this, that this list that I'm about to show here is going to show several different drop downs. And the reason that they're all here, I will explain in a minute, but let me show you first. So it's very clear that some of these things that I have not yet discussed in depth, but they are still present. They still exist in the back of my mind. They are still ever a part of this process, navigation, and how I'm balancing time and emotions and communication with people and all of these interactions. It's very overwhelming. It can feel very overwhelming. And some of these problems have dissipated to some level and some of them have not. But the point is, why I wanted to present all of this is sometimes it can feel like everything is just in your face. That's why I set up the slide to show it in that way. And it's hard to manage, but it's really important that you have your people, the people who can support you. You have your network, those who you can contact at any time. I'm fortunate that I have those people in my life from UNM, as well as friends from DC and people here as well. I have that network of support throughout this process. And yes, even though there's been many defers, many delays that have been frustrating within this, I've been able to open my heart to these people and share my frustrations, and then they've helped me guide through this process and keep me sane throughout all of this as well. So now I'd like to turn the tables and allow you the opportunity to share your experiences, or if you don't want to share those experiences, I understand that completely, of course. You can chat, type in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand, then Yvette will manage and allow you to turn on your video and whatnot throughout this process, and we'll start a discussion going. But really, there's two different questions that you can answer, either or whichever you want. But what are some of your personal challenges? Some maybe during the preparing phase, and then some while you're actually on site within that context. What does your experience look like? And then secondly, who are your network of people? Who are those people that you can ask for support and things that you need from? What are the needs that you have, and who are the people you can go to for those things? So now I will turn it over. Thank you, Yvette, for managing this.
Thank you. So everyone, if you'd like to just unmute yourself or raise your hand. Yes, Betty. Go ahead.
So I do have to say that I really appreciate you sharing your experience. Just I've so many times I felt the same in my project where it kind of has gotten derailed. And however, the biggest struggle is balancing, so you have work and school and all of the different components of life, right? Making sure that, like, for example, my youngest child dropped out of high school and then moved out. And suddenly I, here, I'm an empty nester. I have no kids at home. And it's just, it throws you for a loop. And, your whole life gets turned upside down. And dealing with these things, you don't really expect them to come up, the big things to come up in these moments. And so when they do, you're left with, okay, what do I do? And, I still have these expectations of myself. I have to finish by May, or, I'm going to do it by this timeline. And it doesn't happen, right? And so being able to realize that expectations are great. It's good to have expectations, but I think it's important that we also give ourselves some grace and some flexibility to adapt and roll with the punches if we need to, and change what we need to when we have to. So I feel for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, that's exactly what I was talking about, this ability to adapt in different situations, whatever may come up. Of course, you can't predict everything. You don't know what's going to happen 100% in the future. You can say, okay, maybe X, Y, Z are going to happen, but then, of course, all of your plans could be derailed. So having this mental preparation to know, I know how to adapt with whatever may come up, that's key. And the importance to adapt really comes from also having those people that can help you with this process. So maybe venting to them or bearing your soul to them, and then helping them, letting them help you within this process, learn to adapt and know what that means as well. And having access to a therapist is very helpful in this as well.
Yeah. And if I do want to add, if that's okay, I do think that especially for doctoral students or in any PhD program, there's so much we don't know. And timelines come and go, they get stretched, they shortened, and you mentioned doing your comprehensive exams and then doing the work, and one comes before the other, and one's still in progress. And I've noticed the same thing has happened to me in my journey. When we think of scholarship applications, those don't always line up with where I am in the process. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you have to apply after you have, IRB approval. But then, this scholarship, you're supposed to apply while you're doing your, your dissertation and while you're writing, and you're just like, there's just so much going on, and trying to line things up when they need to happen. It's chaotic. It's
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
We have a comment on the chat. Maria, if you want to read that out loud, or if not, I'll go ahead. It says, very appreciated for your candid presentation. I think that doctoral students in this stage of dissertation work, we all have endured loss and isolation. Your experience helped me to have something very clear, have a good network to support you, and you have confirmed that. Thanks again for sharing this. Congratulations.
Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate just, right, we needing that help to kind of reach that moment of clarity. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. The most important thing is that we need to support each other. We need to be able to have open discussions. And often I think we joke and we say things, you know, like people, when they say, oh, how long have you been a PhD student? I say, don't even ask. It's a forbidden question. Don't ask how long I've been in the program. And we joke about it. Oh, how's your writing going? And we make a joke of it, right? We're like, it's like nails on a chalkboard. We're like, oh, no, let's not talk about that. However, at the same time, these conversations need to happen. We need to have these conversations with each other, because there's maybe people who aren't quite there yet in their journey. Maybe they're not doctoral students, but at least they know what's possible, what's to come. It's important to network with people outside of your immediate academic environment. I think that's just key, being able to have these networks, these circles of friends and support. Just recently, I was having a conversation with my older brother, and they asked me just how I'm doing, where I'm at, what's the latest. And I decided to, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and just be very sincere. And I said, honestly, not great. I feel just torn, emotionally exhausted. I feel like I'm not doing my best work. I feel like I'm trying to put forth my best effort, but I'm missing the mark here. And my brother asked me, well, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I have done all my applications. I got my grant. I've been trying to move forward with my research. I've collected data. I'm a little behind on my writing, but I'm able to do all of these things. I have a few publications that I've managed to get out, some presentations. And he said, well, there you go. Like, clearly you're doing a lot. There's a lot that you have done. What's the problem? And of course, there are, he framed it so nicely, asking, like, you've done all of this. How does this relate to the work that you're doing, the greater world, your experience? And just being able to talk through that has really been so helpful. It helped me to realize, you're right. I have done and accomplished all of these things, but also how it allowed me to be able to explain my work to someone who's an outsider, who doesn't live in this world, who's not in just an academic environment, in academia. So just being able to have those experiences, get out of your immediate environment, have conversations and engage with people who are outside of your world, who may not know and have that insider information. I think it's a wealth of knowledge that you're going to discover. Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Just before we wrap up, I do have some.
I do have a pair of questions for you, but I don't know if someone would like to go first.
Okay.
So, something that I was thinking while you were talking about your experience was, what kept you going? How how do you manage to stay at least motivated to the point to where you're at right now?
That's a really good question.
And let me say this,
Sure.
because for me, I'm constantly asking myself, like, why am I doing this, or who am I doing this for? And it's very much like the commitment that I already have with the community that keeps me, I
Mhm.
don't know, just take those challenges in the first place.
Mhm. And I want to say that, yeah, that commitment, that's definitely a motivator. And I think that's a big part of it for sure. However, even just the support, having the supportive network when things go awry, I have people, I have a community, I have a system that's able to kind of keep me straight and keep me going and, working towards my goal. And if you can have that, I think if you have that internal motivation, I think if you have clear ideas as to what you want to do, where do I want to take this? What is the final, the final goal or the final uh, just vision that I have, whether it's, as, I'm looking at interpreters or I'm looking at interpreting in general. And, how does that relate to this world? Why am I looking at interpreters and their work? Am I looking at it through the lens of, the deaf students who are essentially being affected by their their interpreted education? I don't know what that's going to look like when they reach adulthood. How can we best support the interpreters and maybe improve interpreter education, right? However, we can't kind of predict what this is going to look like, but I still want to contribute. I see that there's a need. I see what's happening there. And I want to be able to do work that is going to make a difference, even if it's just, one location. My work is in one particular site, but that's still going to be information gained. That's going to be a perspective gained, and that's going to make a difference. So I think, again, it's important to have this perspective of, as you said, why are you doing your work? What drives your work?
Seven?
Yeah, Martin, thank you for your talk. I really appreciated your candor and just kind of putting your heart out for us. I really appreciate that. I have a kind of hypothetical question for you. If knowing what you know now, what advice would you have? What advice would you give yourself back in, October about the field work? Not being able to change any of the setbacks, not being able to change any of the actual set of events, but what advice would you have given yourself, or how would you have changed your mindset in a way to kind of help you get through those challenges?
Wow. Damn, that's a good question. My hypothetical answer here for your hypothetical question. If I could go back in time and go back to October, honestly, if you said I can't change any situations and I can't change any of the setbacks, anything that has kind of transpired since then, maybe just a subtle warning. Just like, heads up, this is bound to happen. However, right now, while you're in this moment, there are people who are supportive. Like, I guess it's important to be able to have that level of like reflection of like, who, make a list of people who are in your immediate environment that can support you. And I feel like the key takeaway of this presentation is have your people, right? Have your network, have your support system. I can't stress it enough, right? You need to just, it's needed. It's absolutely necessary. So if I could go back to October, I would just emphasize that. I would say make a list of all of the names of people that you're going to need, and know that they're there for you. Know that they are there for the hardest moments that you're going to face. They're people that you can lean on, people that you can depend on, because I mean, yeah, it's going to be tough. Things get hard. You're going to feel moments where you're completely lost. Remember who you can nudge, who you can reach out to for that helping hand, so that they can pull you out of those dark moments. Yeah.
That's really great advice. Thank you.
We have a question from Deborah. Want to go ahead?
Hi, I just wanted to talk because I'm in a kind of a similar place that you are, Martin, in a stage of my work, and my lighting in here is very weird. But so the things that I would tell myself early on is, one, I delayed my IRB a lot because I was afraid of them. And to tell myself, first of all, IRB is there to help you when they give you revisions to do, when they ask questions and you don't understand what it is that they want, go back to them, email them, call them, whatever, the same day. And they can clarify for you what that question is that they had, because I spent a lot of time saying, what is it they want me to do? I can't figure it out. And so that delayed me a lot at the beginning. And then some of you know, the pandemic came for me. The shutdowns were announced the day that I was testing out my equipment to do my in-person recording. And so I was on campus and I had my setup and I was practicing how to set it up and how to get it going. And I was scheduling appointments with participants to do the recordings, and found out that everything was being shut down, and obviously I wouldn't be able to do in person anything for a while. And so then I had to go back and rewrite my IRB again to do it on Zoom. And then I had problems with people not responding to, I had a community person who was talking to people saying, are you interested in participating, and giving me their contact information. And nobody was responding when I would email them. And so again, flexibility. So I guess my advice, first thing is, know who is your support system, because there are people that you know, but IRB, I did not consider my support system at first, but if I had, then I could have made my life a lot easier at that point. And then second of all, figure out how to be flexible. And third of all, tell your advisor when you're struggling. Because I was said, you know, I've only got 3 recordings, I need to have 5, and I can't do this. It's been going on too long, I'm ready to give up. And she said, oh, okay. And she emailed the people that I needed. And I mean, not everybody responded, but she was able to give me contacts at that point that, because she didn't realize quite where my head was. And so let them know. Talk to people, and that's a really useful I think thing to do, and that's where I am now.
Well, thank you so much, Deb, for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. I cannot agree more. IRB, I should have started that long ago, right? In retrospect. But really, my first meeting with IRB was in August of 2021 about this particular project. And that should have happened way before that, a lot earlier than 2021. And I had started writing, you know, I had kind of the framework, my initial thoughts, what kind of a rough draft of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. But at that time, they're saying like, well, all of these things are still missing. And I said, oh, you know, darn, like I gotta get all these things. I need the letter of support. I need this, I need that. And trying to get all that done prior to getting here. And then with all of the the delays, working to get the letters and the things that I needed, and then submitting those things. Like if I could go back to that mistake of having one informed consent form. If I could realize that, you know, the past, Martin, if, you know, they thought, okay, yeah, like keep it simple, make sure it's all inclusive, just, you know, the simpler the better. They just have to, you know, I just have to translate one form instead of multiple forms. It's just, they need to sign one form instead of multiple forms. I can gather just one. If I could do it all in one go, done. And that's totally not what happened. It came back and turns out I needed more. And so if I could, sometimes things that are more efficient, the strategies that one thinks are going to be the easy way to do it, don't always turn out that way. And back to your point, Deb, about talking to IRB and seeing them as a system of support. Yes, absolutely. They're there to support us. And communicating with your advisor, at least, with your chair, if any, if no one from your committee, if you don't reach out to anyone, at least be in touch with your chair. At least stay in contact, meet with them frequently as possible, not just oh, this is an update, just let you know, things are good. No, make the effort to meet with them, see, have a meeting, a video meeting. If I had not done that with Barb, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know where I would be. Because of her advice, her comments, just her ability to get me back on track. That's the reason I'm here. And I did want to add something else that I kind of had forgotten about. So yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to add there. I forgot I was going to say something, but now I can't remember. Okay. Any other questions, comments from the audience?
Yes, we have one from Len. Len, go ahead.
It says I can't share a video because the host has stopped it. Not sure what that means.
Maybe you can share the link in the chat.
No, like
Thank you.
my video. All right, that works.
There you go.
Hi,
I see.
thank you for this
Sorry.
for the presentation. First I'm going to tell the story, and then I'll ask about kind of how you find like your support networks sort of when you're in the field. So last summer, I was doing my field work. I do field work from a bicycle in northern New Mexico. I was camped out sort of up this canyon outside a house of one of the people that I work with. They were letting me stay there. And sort of I came back, and at the start of that canyon, there's a bunch of like dogs. This person lets roam free, and they attacked me. They kind of like upset all night. Next day,
Len, sorry to interrupt.
go to leave, and I see the owner of the place. Yeah.
Len, your video is freezing a little bit and it's cutting out the audio. I don't know if.
Oh gosh.
It's okay.
Let me move into another room and see if it works better. This is the room where the router is. This might work better.
I had to do the same thing.
So should I start again, or was it enough to be able to follow?
We were able to hear about kind of there was like a part of the canyon where there were some dogs that were roaming free, but then after that it would cut out.
Right. So coming back, they attacked me and bit me in the leg as I was riding by there. Like the next day, I see the owner of the house where they're all running around. I'd like never seen him before. So I say, hey man, your dogs attacked me. Like, what's up with that? Can you keep them under control? He says, give me a minute. He goes inside the house. He comes out with a freaking revolver in his hand, like inside a leather holster, just waving it around, obviously drunk. So I'm like, okay, gotta back off here. Go back to where my tent is, pack everything up, go down the canyon. And then the good thing is I'd done some work already with people there, and I was able to like just spend the afternoon on the porch with people that I had interviewed the day before, and then camp out on somebody else's field that I was going to interview later. And so that's how I kind of resolved that situation. But sort of, how do you go about like finding support networks at the place where you're doing field work is the question.
Okay, first of all, I have to say I'm very sorry to hear that that happened to you and that you had this incident. I'm happy that you're safe, Len. I'm happy that you're okay. I'm happy that you were able to find a person who could kind of give you just the space and the support that you needed. Someone who was there to make sure that you felt safe, that provided you that security. So in terms of, speaking as myself being here in my current situation, I think what you did is kind of what we all have to do. We have to, we know that we have a network, right? And we have identified our network. We know where we feel safe. And that's where we can kind of go and rely on. But there will come that point where you start to ask yourself, what are the ethical boundaries? Because these lines are going to get blurred. Am I allowed to kind of interact with this person outside of the work that we're doing? Because maybe they're a participant, and I ask myself these questions. In your particular situation, safety is the priority. It's the top priority. You have to be safe. And if you're not, then, you're not able to do your work. Your life is more important than your work, quite frankly. So in my case, that's, I mentioned the conversation I had with my brother. And this is where, now we're here where there's a lot of turmoil between Russia, they've kind of invaded Ukraine, and there's just a lot of things going on and transpiring. And I was talking to my brother and I said, I'm here in Italy, I'm okay, but my brother was worried about me. They were already thinking about me and where I can go, am I safe? And having those kind of systems reach out, and I do want to kind of say that I am safe. I'm in no immediate danger here where I am.
That's good.
But again, it's important to know where you can go. And when you arrive to the site where you're doing research, that should be part of the process. That should be part of the field work. You should be thinking about, okay, when I get there, I need to find and identify places that I can go. If there's an emergency, where will I go? So again, I think that you do have to address that. I think that, Len, what you did is what we all have to do. It's, what I would do if I were in an emergency. I have a place where I know I can go if I need to. So having that kind of thing, and unfortunately, it's not something that's taught or something that's told to us explicitly. I don't want to say that it's never, but it's definitely not the majority of the time. It's not. So I know that we're approaching the end time here, and I'll try and wrap up. Thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing.
Yeah, and thank you for your follow.
Of course. Yvette, can I show my last slide? It's just the summary, kind of the last slide before we wrap up. Is that okay?
Of course, please go ahead. If anyone needs to leave, then thank you for joining us. And if Martin, if you have a few more minutes, I do have a few more questions.
Okay. Again, I just want to kind of sum up these key takeaways. We can't be 100% prepared for everything, but we need to make sure that we are learning to adapt, learning to be flexible, learning to adapt as things come our way, knowing how to respond to certain situations that we might find ourselves in. Also, we need to be open and honest and talk about our struggles, talk about our insecurities, talk about the things that we face. Don't just tuck them away and hope that they go away. I think we do need to have these candid conversations and these sincere conversations. And find your people. In every sense of the word, find your people. Find that balance between your academic circles, your personal life, and your outside circles, you know. And the last point is just be kind to yourself. If you find yourself in a just difficult situation and you're having a lot of hardship and you're trying to just stay afloat, think back, how have you arrived where you are now? And remember to think of the things that you have accomplished. Find your center, recenter, regroup, and try and move forward and take care of yourself. With that said, bene ringrazio. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much for this talk. I know we all feel very inspired and have learned a lot from you. You're getting thanks in the chat as well. If you do have 1 extra minute, does anyone else have another question to share or comment? If not, I would like to go ahead and announce our next Roadrunner talk on April 15th at noon. And we're going to be having Bethany Lycan presenting on balance and deranked uterine complements in languages of the Americas. And thank you everyone again for joining us. The other question that I wanted to share with you, Martin, is how do you keep those people, like maybe the school principal, motivated in your research, even though, well, because I'm imagining you were constantly giving this change of dates about when the research was going to start. How do you manage that? Because I'm often just embarrassed that I say one thing and then I have to do another one when I go to Fieldwork. So how do you manage that?
For my situation, I was very fortunate because I had one person that I was in communication with directly, pretty much consistently. And they were able to kind of relay that information to other people that I wasn't in direct communication with. So I was able to have one contact person share information, let them know of changes. And so when I started my research, in terms of meeting everybody, I hadn't done that. I did it all in one day. I introduced myself. I kind of explained my role, the project, let them know why I was there, when I wanted to start. And I kind of was very candid. I said, you know what, I'm not sure when I'm going to start, pending, parent approval. Once I get that, then I will be able to get started officially. And they were all very understanding. The teachers have experienced that with parents. Just, of course, that's kind of something that all teachers probably experience with parents. And then COVID, having to deal with the never-ending changes that COVID has brought to the world. And so I think a school has learned to, at least in this current situation, schools have learned to adapt and change on the fly. So when I felt like I had to tell them, you know what, something has come up, we may have to extend the deadline, or we may have to extend this start date, I was met with very little resistance. They were just like, okay, yeah, great. And if I set interviews for the day, and like that day that I mentioned that I had a close contact with someone who tested positive for COVID, I had to cancel some interviews same day. And they were very nice, very understanding, and said, that's fine. If it has to happen another day, it can happen another day. And so what's great is that everyone's here local in this town. It's a very small, kind of very intimate town. Everyone knows everyone. It's not a big area, so it's not like people have to drive 2 or 3 hours to get there and then not have to, cancel their plans and then drive back. No, so my situation's a little bit unique. It's a little bit different, but it's going to depend on everyone's situation. And I think what we can take away is that communication is key, and being very sincere in our communication and transparent in our communication. And knowing that if you return this flexibility and this understanding, that when it's your turn to ask for that, you'll be met with the same. If you need to do a little change in your interview schedule, or if you need to do anything, then you can also, in their understanding, then you'll be understanding when they need to change things up on you. So I think it goes both ways, right?
Thank you. Thank you again.
Any other questions? It's 9:08 here, my time. I don't know if anyone has any other questions.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank
All
you,
right,
everyone,
then,
for your attention tuning in. And thank you to Orlando and Liana.
Thank you.